Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Keep the Line Moving, the podcast designed to talk about leadership, life, and inspiration. I'm your host, Chris Gargano, and for episode 98, we're talking about embracing the process with our guest, Meg Barber, the head women's basketball coach at NYU, where last year the Violets won the national championship with a record of 31-0. That's right, undefeated. Meg Barber has been the head coach at NYU since 2018. Her record, 119-21 with 5 NCAA appearances. She was a player at NYU, graduating in 2002. She was the captain her senior year. She went on to coach. She had an assistant head coaching position at College of William and Mary from 2005 to 2012. Same title at Temple University from 2012 to 2016. She has developed her coaching style. You will hear it throughout this conversation. You don't want to miss it. In fact, she's coming off a very busy summer. She was selected as head coach of the USA Basketball Women's U17 national team, and they won the gold medal at the FIBA World Cup in July. We taped this conversation right as the school year was starting, and Coach Barber was coming off that busy summer. So much to talk about. The conversation begins now with Meg Barber on Keep the Line Moving. All right, Coach, your story is so compelling, not just what you did last season with the Violets, just the whole package. And I'm so fortunate to be able to talk to you about this. First of all, off the top, how are you doing?
I'm recovering from a really busy summer, but our freshmen have just moved in, classes have started. We're really just a lot of adrenaline and excitement about the year ahead.
Coach, what I want to ask you, which is like screaming to me, is you're a coach, you have a style, but you're coaching different levels, right? How do you pay attention to speaking to a college freshman, a college senior, and then somebody a little younger? How do you make sure you're always aware? Or do you just say, okay, I am Coach Barber, I'm going to go in, I'm going to do what my instincts tell me? Or are you mindful of your approach?
That's a great question. I would say for me, it's both of those things. I think I'm very mindful of who I am as a person and how I best, can pull from young people and or just colleagues in terms of interpersonal relationships, in terms of, listening and paying attention and just seeing what the needs are of individual people. So I think, it kind of goes hand in hand in that I'm not trying to be the coach that I watched in movies, growing up. That was a very different style than I really have as a person, which translates to, Meg the coach. And then also with whether I would say it's less about age and just more about the individual. So many athletes learn differently. So many athletes are motivated differently. So for me, it's a lot about just, trying to take the time to figure every individual out, whether it's their learning capacity, whether it's how to motivate, whether it's how to bring a team together. That was one thing that was wildly different from my NYU teams, who we've recruited and built this trust and relationship with, to jumping into, the USA basketball situation where it's the absolute best of the best from every class, trying out, getting to the finalists, making the team. And then also you now have to take 12 of the best players in the country and decide who's starting, who's playing, who's sitting. And, how you can kind of maneuver all that, to me, always has to do with, who you are as a person and how you connect with, those players on and off the court.
That's such a great point. And you mentioned a word in there, and getting to understand each player. And it's a word that's an enemy of all of us. And it's really an enemy of coaches and leaders. You know where I'm going with this, which is time. However, to get the most out of an athlete, you have to spend that time on how they respond to, helpful hints, how they respond to compliments, right? So how do you spend that time, and be mindful again of boundaries? Because you have 12 players, you've got the bench, you've got the support staff. You have to spend time with everybody to get it all flowing in the right direction. Is that fair?
Absolutely. I lean heavily at NYU, I lean heavily on my assistant coaches, who are more like right and left hands than they are, anything underneath me. And I think it's really important to know that people are seeing different things. Also, just I think continuously trying to pivot when a player doesn't seem to be getting something, that you don't just keep trying the same method and thinking that they just must not be able to do this. It's how else can we sort of reach this person? And then I think personal style, I don't coach effort. I don't coach energy. I like to recruit players that bring that to the court. So we're, I'm very, very heavily involved in the recruiting process, obviously. And so we really look for certain core characteristics. So when we're, getting players into our program, we already know, okay, these players satisfy these things that we're looking for at the core of and the foundation of our program here.
So that's a question that is asked often of coaches and of leaders, which is, if you have somebody who's scoring 32 a game and has gets double doubles every game, or somebody that's scoring 22 but is high character.
Mm-hmm.
How do you discern that? Those are tough decisions when you're recruiting. How do you go about a situation like that? I'm sure you're asked that quite often.
I speak all the time. I can speak more so to my teams here, because in recruiting, there are players that score 30 points and quite honestly play in a league that just isn't very demanding. And then there are players that play at a higher level, maybe only average 5 points. And so we're constantly trying to think about how is their skill set and how are, kind of the intangibles going to translate to the college level, especially at NYU. The demands and just what the city has to offer can kind of pull people in a lot of different directions. So, we need players that basketball is, a big part of their life. It's something that, they're very drawn to in terms of excelling, in that field, if you will. But, I reiterate all the time to our team, because we get the same issue once they're here, in that your playing time and your points are not your value. Those things are not the same thing. And your value is you as a person. And I constantly bring that up. We constantly talk about it, whatever your role is, to be the absolute best in that role. And that's where your value is added. A misnomer is that points determine value, or playing time, or starting position. And honestly, I think we, through the years, we've had players off the bench and players who haven't played at all that have brought even more value, to the overall success of the team, because they accepted that role with grace. And they also really put time and effort into being great in that role.
Coach, did you learn that as a player at NYU? A 2002 grad, you were the captain your senior year. You were a great shooter. Did you learn that as you were making your way through the school?
I think I've learned it in terms of vocalizing it, reflecting with players after their careers, and also in being on the Division I side, for a long time, where there's just so much emphasis on statistics and what your impact is, and players transferring in and out. And we don't really have players leave here, so you want to make sure that they're in a really great headspace for the time they're here. I will say, in relation to my playing career, certainly reflecting on it, I mean, I've been to my teammates' weddings, baby showers. We're all on a text chain together. That includes a manager. That includes players that never played. That includes, starters and, people, but everybody was in the trenches together, metaphorically. And so that's what we try to preach all the time, is that, this is bigger than any one year at NYU. This is bigger than your 4 years. This is about the sisterhood of all the players that have gone before, and what you're, continuing to build for all the players coming after you. And I think that kind of helps, them and their brains, like, okay, this isn't about, I say to them, you're not going to remember how many points you had on, January 11th against U Chicago, but you will remember the team dinner we had, or we went bowling, or, all those kind of things. So, just trying to keep it in perspective. Certainly I'm coaching at NYU because I did have such a tremendous and impactful group of teammates around me that are, my best friends today.
So when you were going through NYU as a player and having success, did you know at some point you would coach, or how did you see your future playing out? Because you seem like a person that was grounded this way 20 years ago, right? When you were a student athlete. But when was it that you decided, hey, I want to give back, I want to coach, I think this is what I want to do?
Well, my dad was my first coach. So I grew up, in a household. My mom was a PE teacher and an official when I was younger. So I grew up very much in a household around sports, sitting in front of the TV, watching basketball all the time. So I will say it was kind of in my blood. I just loved the sport from the first time I picked a ball up. Coming to NYU and the opportunities academically, I obviously dove into my major, but also in the summers, I was working basketball camps and, making those connections and just trying to figure out, is this the industry that I want to be in? And the reason I got into the profession is I just had such a tremendous career at NYU in terms of just my own experience. And I wanted to kind of take the tools that I learned, but also put my own spin as a person on what coaching and mentorship could be for, this 18 to 22-year-old age range, which is such a transformational time in life. It's such a fun job.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think, it takes a while to kind of find your own footing in this profession, but certainly coming back to NYU and being so familiar with, what it's like to walk in the shoes of these student athletes, I think this has by far been my favorite coaching job that I've ever had, and the most rewarding.
So, okay, so let's dissect that part. You became an assistant coach, right? Let me look here and make sure I have it right. The College of William and Mary from 05 to 12, and then Temple, where you got your master's degree from 12 to 16.
Yeah.
How were you as an assistant head coach? Because that's a different, everyone thinks coach, but no, it's not. You have a different role. You have a different relationship with the players, or a key relationship with the head coach. How were you in a general term as an assistant coach?
Man, it's almost like hard to remember, because you just I have my head coach hat on now, but it was such a fun time because my boss when I was at William and Mary just, wildly believed in me. And I think at that young age, you just kind of need that in terms of your own self-confidence. And, is this really the profession for me? Can I really grow and kind of move in this profession? And she definitely was demanding in terms of her expectations and accountability, but it really helped me learn so much about just the game and the management that you need in terms of running a college program. And then, she was a relationship person. So whether it was me or the players, I also learned a lot about, the importance of that side. And so I think in terms of role as an assistant, you're right. You're way closer to the players because there isn't kind of that barrier of I'm not controlling playing time as the assistant really, at least in the players' eyes. But I would say personality wise, I pretty much am who I am. So, that hasn't really changed too much, but how you can talk to the players and kind of even give them a pep talk or give them advice. You have to go talk to the head coach about this. Those are all roles that are very, very different as an assistant versus a head coach.
But I have to assume that helps you with your relationships with your assistant coaches, having been in their shoes. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and, Nettie Respondic, who's with me now, was our associate head coach. I called her when I was interviewing for this job, and I had been in the profession already for 14 years at that point. And I said, listen, if I'm going to do this, I want to do this with someone I trust, someone that shares similar values, so we can really get this up and running the right way. So, that I'm very fortunate in that regard. And then Annie Barrett on our staff actually played for us our first 2 years and then came back, to be on staff. So we didn't recruit her, but we inherited her in a sense when I took over the job at NYU. And, she, same thing, we're both alums, but she is a much younger alum. So it's translated, perfectly in terms of her relationships with the players and kind of how she can help bounce some of what they're feeling off with us. And we can also say, hey, you need to maybe encourage this player to come and talk to me about this as opposed to try to figure it out on their own. So she's also been, just wonderful. So we're really, really fortunate here to have, multiple full-time assistants. That makes a really big difference in a program.
Coach, let's look at this. You've said numerous times, which I really appreciate, which is you have your personality. You're committed to your values. and something else that oozes from you, an aura about you that I do my work right with leadership and such. And it's this simple word, care. It's caring, right? Just caring about the individual, how everyone relates to one another, about winning, but also doing it the right way. Is that a safe assumption that there's a ton of caring within the Violet culture?
It is. I really appreciate you saying that. I tell the team all the time, like, I had my career, I wore the jersey. I would give anything to, be young and have another year to be able to be out on the court. But this is their experience. And, I'm a conduit of whatever I can do to help this experience be beyond their wildest dreams. We're in the greatest city in the world. There's all these opportunities, and for select hours each day we have a chance to be on a basketball court playing basketball, and that to just keep the main thing, that's what we're doing. And obviously there's a lot to learn outside of that, but if you don't start with caring, then we say, like, the players don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
No question. All right. The undefeated season. Look at the smile that comes upon both of our faces. Obviously,
Yeah.
you're the smile that matters the most. How on earth? I have so many questions. We have a limited amount of time, but my goodness, did I bury the lead? But I had to. Everybody needs to know all the backstory and how you pulled off an undefeated championship season. My goodness, Coach Barber.
I mean, to think about it, it really dates back to like 2019, which is recruiting, some of the top players in the country at our level who had multiple Division I offers and a lot of other opportunities. And at the time, our facility was literally a hole in the ground between Houston and Mercer and Bleecker, right? We did not have a facility. We didn't have a home base for a gym. So we were kind of selling this idea and asking players to trust us and to look to the future. And I was very confident with the type of school that NYU is, that we could attract the very best of the best and pull some of the Division I talent, to a place like NYU for all that we had to offer. So that's really where the story begins. And fast forward, 4 years in after a pandemic and all these other things. And, the team went through a lot. We were very resilient and just sort of had this relentless, gritty attitude about us for all that we had been through. And then heading into this past year, we added a post player who was the reigning National Player of the Year. She had played at Smith and was looking to do graduate work. And then we had another grad student who was a perennial, just high level player from Babson, who transferred in for our sport business master's program. So we were the beneficiary of 2 starters who came in, who ended up starting on that team. And they were such selfless people. I wasn't sure how it was all going to work out. I was, everybody was like, oh my gosh, you have the best team in the country, before we ever played. And I think on paper we were wildly skilled and had, so much potential, but that's always like a great word and a really hard word as a coach, because I didn't know how the personalities would mesh. I wasn't sure how bringing in a reigning player of the year would have an impact on, some of our premier players. So there was a lot of, I would say, stress, honestly, in the preseason, to try to make sure that the system that I implemented and defensively what we were doing, and then off the court what we were doing, would help take this potential magical team to its highest level that it could achieve. And people are like, when did you know that you were this talented? And I said, like, literally the first time I watched the team play, the first practice we had, I left the court, went upstairs to our offices, and our coaching staff got together. We were like, we could win the national championship with this team. And then from there, it was, being selected to host the NCAA tournament. This was the first year that we hosted because we didn't have a facility prior. So that was really huge to be able to host the Sweet 16 and Elite 8 rounds at home. But it took just so much preparation to have our team playing at that level at that time of year. And then, fast forward the next week, we go to Ohio, and we had kind of a redemption game against Transylvania. They had knocked us out at Transylvania the year before in the Elite 8, and they were also undefeated. And we were number 1 in the country. They were number 2 in the country. And we were able to beat them and then move on to our hallmark movie moment, which is that Morgan Morrison had played for Smith previously. The player I mentioned, who was a reigning player of the year, transferred in. And then lo and behold, we play Smith in the national championship, which was, it was a lot. It was, I think, a lot more emotional for her than people realize. And she was one of the cornerstones at that point of our team. So, for her, we needed her to be like ready to go. And that was, I've never encountered something like that as a coach, having a player play a team that she had been a part of for 4 years and had really had a tough exit. She also lost to Transylvania the year before. So Transylvania had beat NYU, and then they beat Smith, and then they won the national championship. So she also had, just this flood of emotion. So it was not our prettiest game by any means, but we were able to pull out the win and obviously, complete an undefeated season, which was never a goal. I actually think losing a game and the growth that comes from reflecting on that and kind of, okay, what could we have done differently, or why weren't we prepared, or, some of those moments are your greatest moments in season. So even today, when I walk past, we have a banner hanging up, and I walk past and see 31-0. It like still is surprising because it just was never something that we really set out to do. Yet it's such a strong marker of, what an insane season it was.
Oh my gosh, that's so great to hear it from your words right here. It takes us back right to the wonderful moment that was for you and the team. Okay, so when a baseball pitcher's throwing a no-hitter or a perfect game, right?
Yeah.
They sit this over here in the dugout and the team stays away, right? There's superstitions associated with that. How did you maintain the intensity of being undefeated without saying, "Hey, we're undefeated"? You know what I mean? Like, there's a psychology to that. And you said a key word. You said 2 key words in describing the team. You used the term grit and you used the term selfless, right? Those are wonderful attributes to see why you went 31-0. But I will ask you, at times, the weather's cold and practice is tedious and here's finals. There's so many distractions. And that the pitcher over there on the other side, how did you maintain conversation, communication, and language, knowing, all right, it's 19-0, 18, 21-0. Here we go. Here we go.
Well, I told the team when I took this job over in 2018, I said, my goal for this program is to be the most hated program in Division III, because similar to the Yankees, who are in our backyard, and some of these, the Patriots and some of these teams that people just don't like you because you win, and they can't really point to anything you're doing wrong to win, and in many ways, I think, we certainly, to that end, I don't know that we were really hated. I mean, we have great colleagues, obviously, that we compete against, but we had a target on our backs for sure. Being the number 1 team in the country. So my message was very simple. I kept reiterating, like, you're going to take every team's best shot. Every game we play, we're trying to be 1-0, and that's it. We're not looking at, we're now 20-0. We're not looking at, we have 4 games to go. We're not looking at, any of that. We want to be 1-0 today on Friday, February 14th. So I think we kept reiterating that, and it almost became a joke with the team, because they're like, okay, coach, sure, they're really good. Because we would just be, the staff would be like, you don't understand, this team is coming here to beat you guys, and but the team had a lot of self-confidence, I think, from the years of, we had made 2 back-to-back Elite Eights. So this was not a team that was not used to winning. They just hadn't yet gotten over kind of that final hump. And obviously, this year we were good enough to do it.
So you created that edge by having, let's be the team that everyone hates, right? And those are great examples. The Yankees, the Patriots, right? That's a mental edge. That is so tremendous. All right, before we get to all-star moments, I got one more for you. This is where everyone's on the edge of their seat listening that's in the coaching profession. What advice would you give somebody who's maybe in college, completing their playing career, and they're considering this profession? What would you say to that individual?
Go for it, for sure. And put yourself out there. I think, the game on the women's side could definitely use more female coaches, and it is such a rewarding profession to just see. I mean, I have players that reach out now, even my first graduates here, and to just see what they're doing, in grad school, starting families, all these things. This is not a job that's transactional. It's investment in people, and that investment ends up being more rewarding, I think, for the coaches, than it even is for the players years down the line when you're, getting these updates, and you're just, it's just unimaginable how many lives you can really impact, by taking on this job. And I think the hardest thing is to apply for that first job, or put yourself out there, or volunteer, or ask coaches to stop by practices. I think young people, even if they're already in coaching, would be shocked to know it's as simple as emailing a coach and saying, hey, can I stop by practice if you want to learn more? And coaches are always open to that. So I think it's just continue to put yourself out there and have confidence, and just go for it. And, I was turned down from a lot of jobs, and I'm now in my dream job. So, if you just keep putting the time in, and, building those relationships and doing things the right way, things will work out.
That's so valuable. And what you just said, that you were turned down, right? Everybody thinks that success is a straight line. It's not. There's so many rejections, ups and downs, self-doubt, imposter. I could go on and on.
Yeah.
We know the journey, but you beautifully articulated that. That's so valuable. And thank you. Okay. Here we go. All-star moments. First thought, best thought. Are you ready?
Ready.
What is your leadership philosophy?
To be an authentic leader to myself.
Not all players are great coaches. You were. Why?
I think I am now, from the experiences that I've had. And I think maybe in some ways the limits that I had to myself as a player, actually, I was a decent player, but I definitely wasn't the absolute best. So I think almost learning from what I wasn't good at probably has helped me more, down the line, than just being a great player.
In one sentence, what makes a great teammate?
Putting the team over self.
How do you deal with adversity?
Attack it head on and have open and honest conversations. And again, having a strong foundation of your value system is always going to come back to help. So setting the foundation is, long before adversity strikes.
How do you give yourself fuel?
Spending time with my family, and trying to get away in the off season for a little vacation or a little break.
Last one. Never give up. What does that mean to you?
I mean, that's like a life philosophy, that I think my family instilled in me. But I think it's, we use the word relentless in our program. That's one of our core values. And I think, what we talk about is best effort, managing your experience, having integrity. So core values that, in terms of not giving up, don't have to do with a necessary end goal, but the process. And I think if you don't give up on a process, the end goal, the end, what you perceive in the moment to be the end, might feel like a failure. But if you, continue on your push with the process, the outcomes are the process. That is actually the outcome.
Makes sense to me. I love it. Coach, this is fantastic. I'm so grateful. I'm so happy that we were able to do this, and congratulations on all your success.
Same. I hope to see you on campus. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. And in the future, and anyone watching, if you have questions, feel free to look me up online and shoot me an email. I'm happy to assist in any way I can.
And we thank Coach Barber very much for being on the show. Before I get to the takeaways, what about some awards? She and her assistants were named University Athletic Association Coaching Staff of the Year for 23-24. She was named D3Hoops.com Coach of the Year and Metropolitan Basketball Writers Association Coach of the Year. Now to the takeaways. You heard Coach Barber talk about don't be transactional as a coach, right? Impact people in a positive way. Impact their lives positively, not just what they do on the floor. Number 2, manage your experience. Be accountable. You heard Coach Barber. Don't give up on the process. The outcome is the outcome, but you can control your process. Be accountable and show that effort and commitment to the process. What a conversation. What a season. And we wish Coach Barber and the Violets nothing but luck for this season. Hope you enjoyed the conversation, everybody, and I thank you very much. Continue to subscribe, to follow, leave a review, recommend the podcast. We appreciate it very much. Have a great week, everybody. We'll see you next time on Keep the Line Moving. Every week, you hear guests on this podcast talk about some of their biggest leadership challenges. As a leader, you want to make an impact on those you lead and reach your organization's goals, while also optimizing your time management. Wherever you are in your leadership journey, we could all use some help. This is what we focus on with our group and individual coaching services. To book a call or get more information, email me directly at chrisg@garganoleadership.com or visit our website at garganoleadership.com. For our podcast and video producer, Jack Radutsky, and our marketing coordinator, Savin Narwal, have a great week, everybody.